Hello, I'm Waqar Rizvi, and this is Scope. The Babri Mosque issue has been a long-standing and contentious issue in India. In 1992, a mob demolished the mosque, driven by claims that a Hindu temple once stood there. The Indian Supreme Court has now appointed a three-member committee, one of whom has told Muslims to give up their claims to the mosque to resolve the issue. Prime Minister Modi and his BJP ruling party have promised to build the Hindu temple they argue used to exist there. To discuss all of that a bit further, we're firstly joined by Justice Markandey Katju, who is a former judge at the Supreme Court of India and is former chairman of the Press Council of India as well. He's joining us on the line now from Delhi. Justice Katju, we appreciate you taking your time out to speak to us here in Scope. Justice Katju, what do you make of how the Indian Supreme Court has handled the Babri Mosque case so far?
See, this is all politics. There's really no case, it's all politics.
Okay, so let's talk about the politics here. What do you think should the Supreme Court be doing? Because certainly this is an issue which is contentious and has been long-standing since 1992 at least.
There is no issue. The issues in India are unemployment and poverty and malnutrition and healthcare and good education. Those are the issues. This is just a diversionary tactic. Sometimes non-issues are put up as if they are the real issues, and the real issues are sidelined. So this is no issue at all.
But this has, of course, as you know, Justice Katju, very well led to violence and has had domino effect. For example, many people would say the Gujarat violence too was partly, at the very least, due to what happened when it came to the Babri Mosque. What do you make of that then?
All this is all by certain vested interests who want to get some political mileage by promoting communalism and religious feelings. But really, this is no issue at all for India. The real issues are socio-economic, that, as I told you, are poverty and unemployment and healthcare and so on. This is really no issue. It's just being posed as an issue, but it's no issue at all.
But I imagine, then, Justice, with due respect, that without resolving this issue, then I imagine emotions will remain high.
How can you resolve an issue when there's no issue?
But then this has...
This is just, it's just posed as an issue. It's not an issue at all. So where's the question of resolving something which is not an issue at all?
Right. So
the
what
issues are the economic issues, massive poverty and unemployment and price rise and farmers distress. 300,000 farmers have committed suicide. Every second child is malnourished in India. These are the real issues. So where's the question of resolving something which does not exist?
So then what is your stance then on the disagreement over this Hindu temple that may have existed there at Ayodhya versus the Babri Mosque? That's something that there is this disagreement over, and Sri Shankar has also spoken about that, saying that the Muslims should give up their claims, et cetera, or then there will be a Syria-like crisis. Do you agree with that assessment?
All this is humbug. It is all just posing a certain thing as if it is a real issue. How can anybody say where precisely Lord Ram was born 4,000 years ago? How can anybody say at this very spot he was born? It is all nonsense. This is just techniques of getting votes. Somehow certain politicians, they want more votes, so they are befooling the public. But this is no issue at all.
Okay, so as somebody, of course, of great stature in India there, Justice Katju, I wonder then, what are your thoughts, what are your concerns then going forward about this sort of communal violence or possible communal violence in the future, not just on this issue, but overall in India?
See, presently elections are coming in India, parliamentary elections in 2 months. So these are issues which will be raked up to get political mileage. Otherwise, there is no issue at all.
Okay, so Justice Katju, I wonder then about, let's be specific then, about the party that would want to use, for example, I'm going to stick with the Babri Mosque just because that's the easiest example to use by the BJP or Narendra Modi. Do you think that that Indians will continue to go along this line, that his voting base, that his supporters will continue to support his more and more extreme measures and thoughts?
No, I don't think they will benefit from this, because the people of India have seen through it that this is all a gimmick and all a stunt. This is just to get some political benefit, whereas the real issues are the economic issues of poverty and unemployment and healthcare, child malnourishment, and so on. People of India have now largely understood this. So although attempts are being made to whip up communal and religious passions, but I don't think the attempt will succeed, because people have seen through it.
All right, we're going to thank Justice Markandey Katju, former judge at Supreme Court of India, who's speaking to us there from Delhi on the line. We're not going to add two new voices to this conversation to continue taking this forward. We're now joined by Mr. Sam Daniel Stalin, who is a journalist. He is joining us from Chennai. He was bureau chief NDTV, pardon me, but he is not representing any organization in this interview. He's speaking in his personal capacity only. We're also joined by Ms. Sonia Sarkar. She's a journalist joining us from Delhi. Of course, both of them speaking in their personal capacities for us on this issue. Sonia, I'd like to start with you, if I may. What do you make of the Supreme Court decision vis-a-vis this three-member committee? One of those members, as just for a viewer's sake, I know that you probably know this, but Ravi Shankar, for example, has spoken about how Muslims should give up their claim to the Babri Mosque, and he's made a few other statements of concern about Syria as well. What do you make of that entire issue, Sonia?
See, he has been trying to play a role in the resolution of the conflict for quite some time. You know, he has been really trying to get involved for a while. And I remember in November 2017, he visited Ayodhya and he offered to mediate in the Ram Janmabhoomi Babri Masjid case. And there he, in fact, after meeting Yogi Adityanath, if I'm not mistaken, yes, and he actually said if the issue has to be resolved forever, the only solution is that a grand temple has to be constructed with the cooperation of both communities. Now, the fact that he has, as a quote unquote Hindu godman, he would of course want a temple to be built there. But you also have to understand this man's how this man works. You know, all these godmen. You know, they always somewhere they like the proximity to power and to remain relevant, to keep their shops open. They always want to say things, to do things which actually appease those people in power. And we know who are these people who are in power right now in India. And so they speak the same language, and the language today is today in India is the language of hatred against Muslims. There's a new narrative of othering. There's a new narrative of polarization. So you can understand where does he stand today in that case.
Yeah.
You know? So he can actually make a lot of difference and make things rule in favor of Hindu. I don't know Hindus. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, how this panel is going to work, but this is certainly not a good news, because his past statements have been very, very scary. You know,
Sonia, you know, this issue obviously is one that can potentially be quite explosive, can't it? And that, I imagine, worries a lot of people in India. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, of course, you know, because this man has a history. You know, he has made certain comments before which are anti-Muslim. I was in fact reading some of his comments earlier in the day, and I realized it was after the Gujarat riots, he had told a group of journalists referring to Muslims as those people are quite fanatical. It is said in the Quran that if they kill 100 or so people, a Muslim attains the title of Ghazi or a warrior general. Now, where does this come from? I mean, where is it written in Quran? And where, I mean, look at the way these people interpret even holy texts of the other community. So, and you have to understand the relevance of such people in India today. You know, 2 years back, in fact, he held a huge conference in Delhi where the environmental rules were flouted. And these have lakhs and lakhs of wealthy and upper class Indians as followers. So you have to understand where do they stand in Indian context. So they do have huge fan following. They do influence a lot of people, and people don't question them.
Okay,
as I said,
if you allow me, Sonia, because we are now connected with Sam again. I wanted to put that question to Sam. Then, Sam, if you can hear me clearly now, Sam, I'm wondering, what do you make of the involvement of Sri Ravi Shankar, and his involvement in this committee? As Sonia there was describing, he has a huge following. Others like him have huge followings. They can sway public opinion on this, and that can be quite dangerous, can't it?
Well, this is a very long pending issue in India over the last several decades, and the Supreme Court, in its wisdom, has chosen these three people as mediators to resolve this issue amicably through the process of mediation. And yes, there are several concerns and questions raised by several people over the involvement of, in fact, all three of these members, besides the tweets many refer to made by Sri Ravi Shankar. Others also point fingers at the other two members, saying that they're not experienced enough, that in the case of the justice, they say he has given a controversial judgment. But I think since this order comes from the Supreme Court, the court would have definitely taken into account all these aspects. But in its wisdom, the court has found these three men to be good enough to initiate the process of mediation in a time-bound way. And in that sense, I think we should give them.
But to be fair, Sam, if I may come in, because Sam, if we're looking at Shankar's statements, for any such body to be appointed, you would hope that there would be neutral voices, right, to be able to resolve this issue amicably. And I imagine then when you look at Shankar's statements, you don't really see neutrality there. That's a problem, isn't it, Sam?
Well, I'm not holding brief for anyone. As a journalist, I look at the larger picture.
Okay.
The courts have been trying to resolve this over the last several decades, and due to various reasons at this point, they're trying to find a solution through the process of mediation. And I think since this has come from the court, from the top court in the country, I think we should respect that and give it a chance. Nobody ruled out that there could not be a solution, or nobody is sure that there would be a solution. So possibly there are chances for both, for it to happen or for it not to happen. But I think with whatever be the shortcomings in terms of these three members, particularly to Sri, that the court has given this, and it has given clear guidelines in terms of on-camera discussions, mediation process, and in terms of the media not to report this possibly. I think we will have to go by that and give it a chance whether this kind of an arrangement will enable all the.
Okay, let me put that point then, Sam, to Sonia, because Sam there makes a good point. The Supreme Court. Do you agree with Sam that we should respect the fact that the Supreme Court has come to this decision for now? Because it's not like the Supreme Court has completely handed over everything to this committee. They've said you have 4 weeks to submit a report, then you have 8 weeks to arrive at a conclusion. And if at that time, this mediation bid fails, the Supreme Court then will settle this dispute. So it's not like the Supreme Court has completely washed its hands of this issue. Do you think that this should be given a chance, Sonia?
I completely agree with Sam when basically it's not, as he said, that they have not given everything into the hands of these three members. But of course, and the on-camera session is something very important. And my only worry is that whatever they do in the panel is fair enough. Okay, it's under the supervision of Supreme Court. But what they do off the panel, my only fear is that such people usually use social media, or or maybe if not they, but at least their followers would try and create some sort of tension on social media on this. So that's a fear that I have. I'm not sure if this is going to happen. I'm not saying that this is exactly what's going to happen, but given the Indian political climate right now, before the elections, I just hope that everything is done peacefully within the panel and also outside the panel.
That's a very good point, Sonia. We're just going to go into a break. Sonia and Sam, stay with us. We're going to continue the conversation with the both of you. Viewers, stay with us. We'll be right back after this break. All right, viewers, we're back here with Sam Daniel Stalin and Sonia Sarkar, and we're continuing to talk about the Babri Mosque issue and that Supreme Court decision by the Indian Supreme Court, I should say, to set up that three-member committee. Sam, I wanted to come to you and ask you about, as Sonia there said, the political context in India right now. We've already had the UN Human Rights Chief, for example, as you well know, Sam, warning India about how it treats its minorities, not just Muslims, mind you, but Dalits and others as well. Do you think that, or let me put it this way, does that sort of division in India, does that worry you as an Indian?
Well, I think we should understand the Supreme Court has thrust so much of responsibility on all these three members of the mediation committee, if you could call it that way. And so the onus is on them to make sure they live up to those expectations, that they shed their differences, they shed their extreme positions. If at all, they're very serious about making this mediation formula work. Otherwise, we know what's going to happen. The court will again take over the reins of the investigation, and it will resolve this crisis in a legal way. So in that sense, I think irrespective of what the UN has said, this is a court-given direction to the three members, taking into account their role in persuading others, their credibility, and also their past experience in mediation roles like this. If you look at the individual background of every three members, they bring along their own expertise, their own experience, and their own influence in a big way. So I think as the members individually have responded yesterday, soon after the court gave its order, like one of the members, Mr. Sriram Panchu, has said it's a great responsibility given by the Supreme Court and that he would do his best. Likewise, everybody ought to contribute in a positive way, in a responsible way, not to play into the hands, either in the hands of the political system or into the hands of the religious groups. And if they do that, I'm sure there could be a happy ending. Otherwise, I'm sure the court would have no other option but to sort it legally. And given the way in which the social media could twist, could spread hatred, could spread fake news, I think the court has given that condition that they have to do it on camera. The media should not report that. And if they're responsible, they should not be, I hope they would not be leaking out what is happening in the panel with all the stakeholders. If it works well in the upholding the letter and spirit of the Supreme Court order, I think whichever way, I'm sure it's a big way forward. And ultimately, if they're not able to really work together towards an amicable solution, of course, the court will have no other option but to take control of things and in a legal way.
Okay, so Sonia, I wonder what you make of what Sam there did, because the first thing that came to my mind as Sam there was answering was that aren't we trusting too much that these men will be able to work in a vacuum almost and put aside not only their own biases but the society around them? Is that really practical? Is that too optimistic, do you think?
Well, we definitely need to be positive in today's environment, honestly. And if, as Sam also very categorically mentioned about this, Supreme Court entrusting them with such a responsibility and with such a task, we just hope that they do abide by the Supreme Court rules and they do stick to all the ethics that's applicable here. And yes, we have to be positive, but yes, apprehensions are there. There is a lot of apprehension, keeping the past record of this particular person in mind. But again, we have to wait and watch and see how this works.
Because it's not just Shankar, is it, Sonia? Because the BJP in 2014, I believe it was, its mandate was to build this temple. So the BJP, the ruling party of the country's stance on this issue is very clear, and I imagine that has a huge influence. Maybe not on these men directly. I'm not saying that it'll overrule, or maybe it will. That you can tell me according to Indian law, but the government will certainly have a lot of influence here, won't it, about how all this plays out on the streets too?
See, the government will certainly have no influence on the panel because it's a Supreme Court panel and we have fairly a very independent apex court. So there's no doubt about that, it's whatever they do, they will be under the eyes of the Supreme Court, and that would be independent. But what they do, yeah, exactly. I mean, soon after it was announced, there's a lot that's happening already on social media, and how the government or the ruling party plays it out on the streets is we have to see. But yes, there's already a lot of hatred against Muslims at different parts of the country, including Uttar Pradesh, the state where Ayodhya is. So I don't know what more they're going to do. They have already done a lot of polarization, and let's see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Sam, let me go to you then, and I want the same question to you, essentially, Sam, about the BJP's, its mandate in 2014, at least, from what I read, said that it wanted to build this temple. So its stance on this is very clear. That sort of just puts, a damper on this, doesn't it? It will obviously have influence on how people react either way to whatever the Supreme Court decides.
Well, it's certainly true that the BJP came to power with that kind of a promise that it will build the temple there. But obviously now it's in the last few weeks of its tenure, and whether this committee will be able to make any breakthrough or not, that's a different thing. If there is any breakthrough, I'm sure the BJP will take credit for that and will go to town with that, try and make a political capital of it. But at the moment, as things stand now, I think we should look at this development in an apolitical way, because as I said earlier, these three members, it's just not these three members which the government can influence for a solution, because these three members have a great challenge of speaking to all the stakeholders involved in this to bring about any kind of consensus, to bring about any kind of a solution for this out-of-court settlement kind of thing.
But Sam, I have to push you on this point, though, Sam. I do apologize. But Sam, I want to push you on this point that isn't it too optimistic that, for example, hypothetically speaking, if this court or even this panel were to find, let's say, in favor of Muslims or the mosque remaining there or to be rebuilt or whatever, do you really think that BJP supporters and the BJP would stand by quietly through that?
See, that's the court's idea of setting up this kind of a committee. If they're able to agree, or if they are able to arrive at kind of an agreement, then we hope that no matter what is the outcome of it, all the stakeholders through this agree to abide by that. That's the expectation. In what form will they arrive at a solution, we don't know. But if the mediation panel succeeds to bring about that kind of an agreement, then it means no matter what is the outcome, they agree to abide by that. That's the idea. And if they don't agree to abide by that, then the mission fails and the court takes over. So we don't know. We can't presume it will work or it may not work, but we are positive it could work. We should give them a chance. But
okay. Okay, let me get a final thought then from Sonia, if you allow me, Sam, just because we have a minute. Sonia, I want to get your final thoughts very quickly. Do you think that after whatever decision is reached, that there can really just be peace on the streets? Because either way, this is contentious. Either way, this is emotional and sensitive an issue. We've already seen when the Babri Mosque itself in 1992 was demolished, the kind of domino effect that had in other parts of the country as well. What do you make of that, Sonia?
So it's 27 years now, or 26 years or something. I hope we are more matured now, and we don't show our most ruthless face on the streets. But to your earlier question, when you asked whether this is going to play out in the streets, let me tell you, the narrative of BJP had kind of changed in the past 1 month or so. They have again come back to Desh Ke Jawan. They are again playing that narrative on the streets, that hamare desh ke jawan mar rahe hain, hamare, and anti-Pakistan and all that. So they had actually changed the narrative on the streets just before elections. I don't know if this particular announcement is going to give another lease of life to BJP or another threat to their old narrative.
Yeah.
Let's see. We have to just wait and watch. We have to see what these top leaders of BJP say in the political rallies. But as you said, that we had seen a lot of bloodbath in 1992, post 1992. We just hope whatever the decision is, we are more matured and more sensible, and we behave ourselves, I would say. And we have to wait and watch what this panel comes out with.
Very well. We'll leave that as our final word, but of course we appreciate all of our guests and of course their insight and analysis they brought to this discussion. That was Ms. Sonia Sarkar, journalist, speaking to us from Delhi, and we were also joined by Mr. J. Sam Daniel Stalin, who's also a journalist. He was speaking from Chennai. Both of them were speaking in their personal capacities and were not representing any specific organization. Earlier we were of course also joined by Justice Markandey Katju, who was a former judge at the Supreme Court of India. He had been speaking to us from Delhi. Now, viewers, we've had a range of voices. The Justice had spoken about the fact that this is not the main issue that India faces. In fact, in his opinion, it's employment and otherwise. Our two journalists who were speaking to us spoke about the fact that we do have to wait and see how all of this pans out. But of course, there are concerns, at the very least, about Sri Shankar and his statement about comparing this to Syria crisis, etc., and his very clear stance that the Muslims should give up their claims to this mosque. A lot yet to happen in this issue, so we'll keep a very close eye on that here in Scope. Don't go anywhere, though. I'll be back with our next segment after this break. Thank you for staying with us here in Scope, viewers. Now, Israel's prime minister has threatened to cut off oil shipments, saying Iran is circumventing harsh sanctions placed on it by the United States. While he didn't clarify how he sought to do this, this would mark a significant escalation in the Israeli threat to Iran. Iran has in the past made it clear that cutting off its oil shipments would force it to close the Strait of Hormuz, preventing any international oil shipments. To discuss that further, we're now joined by Mr. Daniel Rod, who is an economic reporter. He's joining us via Skype now from Manchester. We're also joined by Mr. Hadi Gholami, who is a political analyst, and he is joining us from Tehran. Thank you both for joining us and for your time. Daniel, let me start with you. How did you react to Netanyahu's threat? What does that mean for Iran?
Well, I mean, you need to look at it in the context of the Israeli political cycle. He's up for re-election. He's under immense amount of pressure with the investigations into his conduct. There's been a long history of him, Netanyahu, acting in suspicious ways, and looks like he's profiteering here and there. So I think it's more for the local consumption in this regard. I don't think Netanyahu would be as wild to consider such an action to attack an Iranian tanker, because that would be an act of war.
Hadi, do you agree with that? Do you think this is just a trick?
Actually, yeah, it doesn't seem, if you take away the political side, it doesn't seem feasible. It doesn't seem possible to do. We have to remember that Israel doesn't have that large of a navy, and they are mostly present in the Red Sea and the Mediterranean, and Iranian oil shipments don't usually go there. And also the whole posture of the Israeli Navy is based on patrolling the Palestinian enclave and those areas. It doesn't have the capacity to go on and do that. It's more it's more like a show, more like a rhetoric, just to gain attention locally. Okay,
so Daniel, if to be fair, I imagine that Netanyahu is obviously on the side of those who want Iran's oil exports to be zeroed, as is seemingly Donald Trump's mission right now. What would that mean for Iran, and what will Iran, do you think, do to fight back?
I mean, Iran is using a series of different methods. It's pushing the buyers who currently have access to the Iranian oil legally via OFAC license. They're pushing them, like India and other countries in Asia, especially China, to continue buying from them, pushing the US to continue their exemptions for several reasons, including refineries in Asia are sometimes more geared up towards using Iranian oil rather than other types of crude. In addition, you've got to look at the wider context of the situation. The oil market at the moment is, teetering on the brink of probably collapsing back into low numbers again. The Saudis don't want that to happen. And, ultimately, the system has to try and have some equilibrium.
Hadi, you're in Iran itself, so tell us what the situation there is like right now when it comes to concerns about how much more oil Iran can continue to sell, because obviously there is this pressure by the Trump administration on all buyers to lower how much oil they buy from Iran.
Actually, Iran has tried for the budget of the next year, they have tried to reduce the oil reliance to 27%, if I'm not mistaken, or it's a figure close to that. But the main problem is that most of the revenue that Iran gets is from the oil, and there are actually, the authorities are actually telling people, and they are telling on the media and in events that this is going to be a hard year for the whole country, mostly economically. We are seeing some effects of the sanctions, but they say it's going to be worse, but we should not forget that the big part of the current economic situation in Iran is because of the administration not really optimizing in the sectors that we have the benefits and just relying on oil and other natural resources.
That's a good point, isn't it, Daniel? Because that's been a standing issue for a country like Iran, or even other oil-dependent countries too. That they depend way too much on their oil sales and don't diversify enough. Do you think that this administration in Iran, or even previous ones, Daniel, have done enough to diversify the economy?
I mean, compared with other countries, it has diversified away from just regular oil exports. It's moved upstream into petrochemical developments. The Persian Star refinery down in the Persian Gulf is one of the examples of this. They've invested heavily to create Euro 5 quality petrol for their internal markets, and obviously a certain amount of that will be exported too, because obviously there's more money to be made from downstream developments rather than just sending the crude. But ultimately, Iran is tied, whether they try and move away from oil or not. There was a recent talk in Iran a few years ago, which was called From Oil to Toil, which was moving away Iran from oil production to mass production. It hasn't really happened due to a series of different failures in the economy.
So how much of that, if I may stick with you, Daniel, for a moment, is do you think, the failure of politicians in Iran?
I mean, it's a combination of different things. It's not, if you look at the Rouhani administration, they have been pretty adamant in their development of the economy, and they've pushed for growth in different areas, including technology, internet, and ride-hailing apps and these kind of stuff. But the architecture of the system of the Islamic Republic does not lend itself to moving away in a quick succession away from oil. It is ultimately tied due to, heritage.
Hadi, do you agree with that? And what are your thoughts, be it the Rouhani administration or the Ahmadinejad administration or even previous ones? Have politicians done enough, and will they now do something about diversifying the economy more?
Actually, yeah, there has been talk about diversifying since many years ago. This is not something new, but it just hasn't happened enough. Mostly because first, there is not much, let's say, effort on the part of the administration. And in the case of the Rouhani administration, they actually tried, but the main issue was that the sanctions actually stopped the plans that they had for diversifying the economy and attracting foreign investment in other sectors that would have allowed us to move away a little from the oil production and the petrochemical products that derive from the oil.
So then, Hadi, do you think that in a scenario where these oil exports of Iran become significantly less than what there are even today, would that then mean Iran would bow to Western demands?
That's a very difficult question. Actually, I don't think that will happen. Actually, because the main issue that Iran has right now is about the missile programs that it just doesn't seem like something that the Islamic Republic would give up, and there are legitimate reasons for the Islamic Republic to keep wanting to have a stronger defense sector. But I don't think so. What will happen is that the situation will get a little more complex, but ultimately this could actually facilitate a little more diversifying in the economy.
Okay, so Daniel, give us the economic tip on this then, because how much longer, if exports were to be lessened significantly from where they are today, can Iran hold on to its stances as they are right now? It would, I imagine, have to bow at some point?
I mean, the Islamic Republic is not for turning. You've got to look at it in the context of the wider economy. The central bank has recently stated that it has enough money to tide itself over for the next couple of years. Iran is attempting to ride out the Trump administration, whether it be the Trump administration going down with an investigation or arrests, or whether he will see out the next 2 years of his term. It will be just a long suffering position for the country, and people will have to grim and bear it, unfortunately. There's not going to be much in the way of exemptions. The so-called Instex special purpose vehicle, which the Europeans from the JCPOA have set up, has remained ultimately a confusing proposition, and it's not clear to Iran. Even Deputy Foreign Minister Araghchi, he recently said that we're not 100% on what the purpose of this is. So the country is still half expecting the JCPOA to help them out, but it's not really panning out in the long run.
Okay, so Hadi, let me put you on the spot and ask you a direct question. Hadi, do you think that this nuclear has not really worked out well for Iran?
Actually, it hasn't, if you look at it, because you see, right now Iran doesn't get almost or nothing, no benefit from the nuclear deal right now, and it just happens that doesn't seem that the new mechanism by the European parts of the nuclear accord is going to work either. Even Mr. Zarif said that Iran is actually running out of patience, because it's just in theory that mechanism has started working, but it hasn't done much, and it doesn't seem like it will do, because the U.S. sanctions actually will target anyone doing business with Iran. It doesn't really solve that problem.
Okay, so I'll give you the final word, Daniel. Just on the deal itself, I imagine many within Iran are questioning, and I know have been questioning for a while now, why is Iran still in the deal? Do you think that Iran should walk away or should stay till its last breaths? What are your stances on that?
If Iran walks away from the deal, then they've walked into a trap, and the American move ahead with whatever plans they have for the Islamic Republic. There is not much wiggle room. If they stay in the deal, they're not going to benefit from it, and America, the U.S. Trump administration, will basically block any continuing trade. May is coming up. The oil waiver sanctions just may not even be extended. We don't know. There's been no rumor on that. India and other countries are lobbying, but who knows in the long run? It's going to be a difficult ride ahead for the country.
We'll leave there as our final thought, but of course we appreciate both of our guests and their time, of course, insight and analysis. That was Mr. Daniel Rod, economic reporter, speaking to us from Manchester via Skype, and we were also joined by Mr. Hadi Gholami, who is a political analyst, and he was speaking to us from Tehran, the Iranian capital, via Skype as well. Viewers, as our guests spoke about, it does seem like this Netanyahu threat may just be empty rhetoric, but we do know that he's been going very hard after Iran, especially since Donald Trump has come into office, because he's found a president that will essentially give him carte blanche and support Israel in its stances against Iran, at least seemingly on the outside, when it comes to specifically sanctions and other such factors on the Islamic Republic. For Iran, though, obviously oil is a vital export to keep its economy going, and that is, of course, the one area of concern to see how that will play out for the region as well. We'll keep a close eye on that situation here in Scope, but I've been Waqar Rizvi. Thanks for watching.